Divine Source, Great Spirit, we're here to bask in your grace and your glory. We're here to be channels for your love and your guidance and your wisdom. Speak to us, speak through us, and help us all to open our minds and our hearts to receive the healing that you're always offering, to help us to remember that we are safely at home with you and that we are whole and complete. And so it is.
Welcome to Talking Spirit. My name is Yuta and I'm back with my friend Elizabeth.
Greetings, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for bringing in wholeness into the prayer because I think it lines up really nicely with the topic for today. As I'm sitting with it, I'm just kind of hearing, this whole spiritual awakening journey is about healing and coming into wholeness and coming back to the truth of who we really are. That's the ultimate sense of going on this journey at all. Because something doesn't feel whole, it doesn't feel complete, it doesn't feel right. And so we go on this journey to find answers to those questions of why do things not feel right, and what is it that doesn't feel whole, and how can we make it whole. And this morning in prayer around what we should be talking about today, this whole idea of healing came in with sort of this aspect of having to do this inner work, shadow work, whatever you want to call it, but this inner healing work to kind of like a very active work to bring all the parts of the mind back together and bring wholeness back together in a very dynamic and, I guess the word active, active is what comes to mind, in a very active way. Because, as we find ourselves here in sort of a grand sense, and many spiritual traditions kind of talk about this, that, there's been a splitting off from our source. But the way this world works is, once you're here, things are very complex, and the split isn't just one, but it goes down seemingly into all these levels, right? So our minds, the one that seems to be connected to this body or that body or that body, it seems like they can split off into smaller and smaller bits. And one part of this healing journey that I've experienced and I've seen with others, and I know Elizabeth has plenty of experience with, is bringing all the little parts back home. And yeah, I guess the other piece to it too that came in really strongly for me in my prayer this morning around the topic was to give these parts the space to share with me, or if it's your part, then with you, but to share, give them the space to share why it is that they're split off and maybe stuck somewhere. So yeah, we'll just see how that wants to be communicated, and what stories want to come up around it, and yeah, which ways we want to take it. But I think that's sort of the little summary for what the spirit would like us to talk about today. So yeah, what do you got, Elizabeth?
Well, I think I've told this story before, but it just bounced in, so I guess it'll be helpful. When I was a child, my mother was taking me to the dentist, and it was winter time, and it was in a place called Chestnut Hill, and the dentist was on the hill, and it was a bit nasty out, snowy, icy, and we were walking back. I think the car was being worked on. We had a flat tire as we got to the dentist, and so we were walking up to the mechanic at the top of the hill, and I had this flash of a vision and felt this pain run through my body and saw blood and felt pain and had just like it stopped me in my tracks. And when we got to the mechanics, the lift had fallen and pinned somebody, the mechanic, under it. So I had this precognition or in the moment experience of oneness with this mechanic. And I was horrified when I had the experience because I felt it so deeply. But then I was even more horrified when I then got word that what I experienced within myself had happened in the world. And I wanted to shut those things down. I mean, that was my childhood, was receiving that kind of information all the time, hugely sensitive, picking up everything off of everyone, it seemed like. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know how to manage it, and I just was totally maxed out by what turns out to be a gift of the spirit to be helpful to others. But as a kid, it was just this massive burden. And events like that were things within myself that I tried to cordon off, and deny that it happened or deny that that's how I operate in the world. I have just countless stories like that of just trying to dim my light and trying to deny who I am, and often making those things a wrongness about myself. And I just saw the other day, I love how spirit works because, we'll see movies before these talks and things that we don't really know. We're getting set up by spirit to deliver a message. But I felt inspired to take out X-Men Dark Phoenix, which I had not seen before. And in the story, this young girl has some powers that she doesn't understand. And it appears that she, in her inability to manage the gift, seems to get frustrated and causes an accident that ends up killing her mother. And so she goes on this journey of being brought to a teacher, and the teacher is working with her to help her learn how to work with this gift. I won't tell the whole story, but ultimately we see in this woman's journey that her teacher, in a way, is trying to help her sort of forget about some of her memories. We learn later. The teacher is actually trying to dampen the memories because he understands that they're torturing her, these memories. We've been shown by the Spirit there's a different way you have to go about it. And there is a time and a place for us to have these things revealed to us. But this example of this memory from my childhood, I had to work with that over and over again with the Spirit. I felt guilty. I felt like maybe I had done something that had caused this accident to happen. I felt like a freak that I was feeling things like pain in my body, like I had had something dropped on me. So some of us seem to just be more aware of some of that kind of operating system. And again, if we're going to be in the channel with Spirit, serving our fellows and serving our purpose, everything has to come online. Everything has to be put at the feet of Spirit to say, I don't know what you want me to do with this, but I seem to be having this X, Y, or Z thing happening for me, and I don't know what to do with it. What Spirit brought me to was, we need to go in and look at it, and we need to go and face the feelings of guilt, the feelings of, I did something wrong, the feelings of, I don't want this gift, take it away. So that's just like one story that's showing up in this moment about these parts of our mind or these parts of our psyche or personas or personality, however you want to talk about it. They're not all the same, but we can kind of just sort of muddle them all together. We have to be taken to a place with the Spirit to bring these parts home, bring them back into our hearts, because that little girl that I was at that time that had this gift, I didn't like her for a long time. I viewed her as inconvenient, as making me vulnerable, as being dangerous. So, there are lots of ways that our minds relate to the way we seem to operate here. And again, that's just one example of many of the kind of inner work, as you said, the deep dive into the mind that when we talk about, you got to face yourself, you got to look at your shadow, you got to look at, this disowned stuff in your mind. This is like an example of it. So that's what's showing up here.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. I think what comes to mind for me is that, when we talk about this kind of thing, and I said the word active in the beginning, but like for me, it's not about going on a witch hunt to find these bits, right? Because they usually just show themselves. They
Mm.
usually come up and show themselves when, well, I don't know, when they're ready or when you're ready. Well, actually, I think they probably show themselves a lot, and it takes a while for us to really become conscious of them. But, when they do come up and there starts to be a realization like, well, actually, something doesn't feel like me right now. Because, I've had this experience in the past where I would be in situations with others and also with Elizabeth, and something would kind of come over me, let's say. Like I'm still here, right? But there's some kind of operating system that would come over me and start to behave according to its ways and its personality, actually. And I would be sitting there as well. And I would be a little confused because it would feel like I didn't fully have control. I didn't have control over what was going on and how I was behaving. And it would end up making me really, mm, well, in the end, very annoyed. And, this, I'm not talking about schizophrenia or anything like that. That's not an area of my expertise at all. So that's not what I'm talking about. But, you know, me being in a place where a past version of myself, a very young version of myself, would start to operate and would basically stop me from feeling fully free in the moment. So when that finally came to sort of the breaking point for me in this particular instance, I was lucky lucky enough to be around Elizabeth at the time and actually put words to it for myself and receive some helpful instruction from Elizabeth and to just go in and actually have a little conversation. And, I think that's why kind of the message of this, using voice and, speaking came up as well, because this little part that got stuck in a very specific memory for me of, I don't know, maybe I was 4 or 5. There was a particular memory that I had been, like you, having this memory, play over and over in my mind throughout the years of growing up. And just for me, I was just really confused about what happened because it seemed, me looking at it, it just seemed like it made no sense. It was kind of like the first memory of me being frozen in shame around something absolutely insignificant, seemingly. But part of my mind, well, my little mind back then, just had no idea how to deal with the perceived wrong that it did. And so, I ended up just going into this process within very intuitively, just opening up a conversation with this little version of me there, 4 or 5 years old, cute little thing, right? And just seeing what actually I thought happened back then so that we could really start to like open it up and also it was kind of a conversation between me at 4 or 5 and me at 34. 35, and listening to this little version of myself and also helping it see things the way they really were, which wasn't what this young version of myself really thought in the moment. So it just opened up the picture, and all of the all of the shame around it got completely erased, and this playfulness just ended up being there, and like a real joy. And I did this whole process while in the bathtub, and I was just sobbing in the bathtub because part of my mind felt like it was stuck in this memory, and it would come up in certain situations that maybe energetically lined up with the energy from that memory. And yeah, and through that little conversation I ended up having, it didn't take a lot of time, it didn't take a lot of energy, but it just released all this joy, like childlike joy, and aspects of my seeming personality that I always felt were there. And obviously they come out, but they've been much more free, like freed up, since I actually went back into this part and brought it home and just welcomed it and loved it up. And it's it was like one of these really important moments of my spiritual journey, I feel, because it you know it removed from my mind an unhelpful mechanism, and it just hasn't really shown up again since I welcomed this little part back in. And yeah, I mean, it seems really incredible that that's how things can work. And yeah, before we started recording today, we were kind of talking a little bit about this, and just this idea of, there's some healing that can take place that just happens sort of cerebrally, like just by learning something new, or hearing helpful ideas, and maybe doing some like belief turnarounds and belief work in the mind like that. And then there's this whole other realm of healing that's a bit more dynamic. It's not better or worse, but sometimes this more, yeah, it's just a different healing approach to certain issues that sometimes the more cerebral ways don't really get at fully. So yeah, just having this sort of open mind around how healing can happen and how things really work in the mind, a- as we seem to find ourselves in this funny world. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it at this point.
Yeah, I think it's important that you said, we're not talking about schizophrenia. It's an important caveat of like we're not therapists in the world's terms, and we're not talking about the mental disorders that the world would put labels on to. These are things that have been like the inner journey with the spirit and inner exploration. And, there could be therapists that talk about things like this, I don't know, but we're really just talking about our inner journey with the spirit. So if you need that kind of support, please find it. But it's like, sometimes we talk about the masks that we put on in the world. Well, sometimes these masks are from these moments of what, one term could be called soul loss. And, whether you want to talk in those terms or not, doesn't matter. But, like when I did the Peruvian shamanism, that might have been a way that they talked about it. A moment in time, there's a big emotion attached to, as you said, a misperception. And that big emotion usually locks down, as you said, a part of our energy, a part of our mind, a part of our light body, however you want to think about it. And so all of a sudden we start operating with this massive drag on our energy. And as you said, become frozen in time. That's really it. And When you were in my home, I had shared this with Yuta, and we're about exposing our journey. I would see Yuta some days show up, and rather than Yuta, the big, bright, potent light, there'd be a little girl. She'd be a little submissive. She'd kind of turn her head down, just like the little girl, like, maybe go grab a teddy bear and get into bed. Not a judgment. That part was very active at times. And as she said before, she couldn't step up and be a collaborator with me with that part unresolved. So, very practically, like, what does it look like to have these unresolved parts within ourselves? There's a prime example. And it's not a good or a bad or a judgment or anything else. It's just looking at it straight. We were talking again about this movie, this Wonder Woman movie that we mentioned in the last talk. Soul loss drives a lot of behavior at the personality level. In that movie, there's a guy we have come to learn, was dysfunctional family. People made fun of him as a kid. And the next thing you know, he is in his shadow trying to get power at the most extreme level. And there's a woman who's working in the museum where Wonder Woman works, and she also has a story of people never listen to me, nobody ever pays attention to me. And when she gets a chance to grab some power, that shadow figure, that mask, grabs on, locks on big time. So these disowned parts will drive our experience. They will step in front of us, as you said, and I get to see them. I actually have that gift of seeing when a soul part shows up and they come in front. It is like a mask. It's like a little cardboard cutout almost, usually, is how I sort of see it energetically. And that becomes the operating system that's most dynamically running our show in that moment. It's quite amazing. So, Yuta and I have been mostly brought through learning about ourselves and these parts of ourselves with the spirit inner journey to do this kind of a thing. And maybe for some people that would come and do a talk like this, they've gotten it through a therapy or a training or whatever. I don't really know. But again, if we want to wake up and we want to experience our wholeness, then anywhere we've cut ourselves off from ourselves, anywhere we've put some part of our energy or our mind into a box with a lock and key and said, do not disturb, don't go near it, we're going to have to eventually take the key with the spirit and open that stuff up and bring it back home. And so again, you might need a therapist to walk with you in that way. You might need a shaman or a healer or whatever, right? Each person's going to need a different guide. And that was part of what was showing up right before we got on here was sort of a teacher symbol and a maturing symbol. Like I got these two little paw prints that came out in my charms. And one was a little paw print and one was a big paw print. We're talking about, as you said, talking to these parts of our mind and making peace with them, peacemaking with ourselves. And bringing, for me, most of the time, it's been maturing an immature part of myself, getting that part to be grown up into the truth, which is wholeness and completion. So, we need to be taken on a journey to learn how to make peace. And usually it's, pretty simple and talking, as you said, to some of these parts, like learning, where is this part of myself hung up? And encouraging them, some of the trainings that I've done. It's like calling these parts back and not always this life. It could be seemingly over time, to collapse time. We have to sometimes go find these parts that are frozen somewhere. So often it's a loving, sweet kind of come along, it's okay. But then other times we have to be coming at it from a different angle, which is to not coddle these parts, to tell these parts why it is that they are in disservice to themselves. Because once upon a time, we thought in a moment in time that behaving a certain way or thinking a certain way was going to keep us safe. Most of these parts that we sort of fracture off within ourselves are coming from a place of protectionism. we're doing the best we can in a moment in time to stay safe. I'm just having come into mind when I did the shamanic training, the gentleman that started the school, he's a bright light. It's a interesting man, Alberto Viodo. And he talked about how when he was a child, I think he said he was from Cuba, and some bad actors, maybe the police, I don't know, came in busting through his front door. He's 4 or 5 years old or something, and came looking for somebody in the house, I think toting guns and all the rest. Very scary thing for anybody to experience. But for a 3 or 4 year old, he went deep within himself in that moment. He suffered a major soul loss in that moment because he didn't know what to do. The operating system of a little 3, 4, 5 year old could not compute what was happening on the screen of his life in that moment. And his way of handling it was to go within, lock down his self, lock down his memories, lock down his energy. And he ended up having to deal with that 30, 40, 50 years down the road because that little scared boy was hanging him up, just the way we were talking about you got hung up and just the way I got hung up. So it's really, yeah, it's just, as you said, just part of what seems to have been required for me in my healing journey. And it's been required over and over and over again on lots of different seeming issues. So it's important to talk about it. I don't know. I don't read other people's work. I don't really feel guided to see what people are talking about out there in the world generally at this point. So I don't really know, in the modern way of looking at healing work, what people are talking about right now. But I know this part of my journey has been a massive, massive part of my journey, this kind of inner work. So.
Yeah, I actually think it's coming a little bit more into awareness, this whole idea of yeah, having to bring these parts back and some of the time sending them, even sending them to the light. And, I think the reason we're talking about this too is because ultimately, like all of us really just want to be in our joy and be in this place where we can be free to share what the spirit would have us share in exactly the way that he wants us to share it, right? And when there's parts of our minds that are sort of cordoned off that sometimes come in, especially in moments when maybe it's a little scary for us to shine. It seems like in some of those moments those parts come back up because like you said, they were kind of made out of a desire to be safe. So going forward then in moments where it feels like we're unsafe, they can come back up and start operating. And that's not really what we want. It's not going to be, it's not going to allow us to fully stand in our magnitude and this just really strong sense of purpose. And before we start recording, we were kind of talking about just this idea that when these parts kind of come in and start operating, it's almost like you have a toddler running the show in a lot of cases. And said like, you might not want to have a toddler, doing your taxes or running your business because it's going to go sideways pretty quickly. And but there is an aspect to the toddler that we do want, like we do want to come into our childlike innocence. And when we start to really integrate all of these parts and call them back home, that's when that process, yeah, of becoming whole and also becoming childlike in a very spiritual, truly helpful sense, that's when that all can really start to happen. And, one of the cards that I pulled is called Love Begins, and that's what happens. This is what it's for. When we become whole, like when we make our mind whole again in collaboration with the spirit. So, with a lot of prayer and just a lot of yeah, prayer, just really being in with the spirit and the whole process, things come together in a way where it does feel like more love can come through us, and we can also feel, we have like a capacity, I think, to experience joy and love just kind of grows, because instead of having, like you said, the little cardboard cutout between us and others, there's no more cardboard cutouts. So we can actually have these like really helpful connections and really actually go, like it's like this, to me it looks like it's like a circle of love, in connection with other people. There's the flow really can actually happen then without these filters, without the little cardboard cutouts. And yeah, and that example that I shared, that was just one of the ones that really I can vividly remember. But, I've had other moments too. And again, like, you were part of it too as well, Elizabeth. This story that I had going of these weird deja vus I was having. And, you
Mhm.
know, just one sort of little comment from you about how to approach it, that maybe I didn't know exactly what it was, because it was different from what I would say, quote, is a normal deja vu. It was a very visceral experience that I was having, and it was disruptive to my daily living when it was happening, because it would sometimes, it would almost knock me out. Literally, I would get dizzy, I would get nauseous, I would have to sit down. And it had been happening since my early 20s. So, like, over all of these years, having a fairly consistent, reoccurring, I can still only call it a deja vu because that's the closest thing I can really relate it to. But, it ended up bringing me back, like you said, like sometimes these parts aren't from this lifetime. And it brought me back actually to something much older than this lifetime, seemingly. But, the whole healing is sort of holographic and quantum. So it doesn't matter when things happened. If they weren't dealt with then, then, through the desire that we have now and the purpose that we have now and just the willingness to heal, they show up now. And this quote unquote deja vu thing that kept happening, it was something very old where it seemed like I like stumbled or fell or actually rode a horse into a hole that I didn't anticipate. And then I'm just down in the hole. And so, like, I'm stuck again. Part of me is stuck somewhere. And it was calling me, like, it was calling my attention to itself in these ways of, having these moments of deja vu, seemingly. And it only took one moment for me, really, to look at it. And it hasn't happened ever again. It's been years now, a few years now. And that's really, that's an indicator to me, like, okay, great. I guess we're done with that. And whatever work I did actually made a difference. It's not, this isn't obviously the whole thing's made up, right? And that's where we always get into paradox territory, but the whole world's made up. And, whether you have a strong imagination or, whether that's the problem or not, you're just imagining things. But no, like there's a really, I can point to the day when I went back and actually got in touch with this part that got stuck in time in a hole. And that, whatever effect it was having on me now in this lifetime, it's just not there anymore. So there's sometimes these things, the effects of these kind of lost parts can look really varied, let's say. And but the effect that you'll feel from actually healing those bits of the mind, I think, it'll be really, really rewarding and just so obvious that the healing that you're doing has an actual effect on your experience, and the capacity to love and give love and experience joy and be in the channel with the spirit just grows, like, I don't know how many fold, you know. So it's really worth it.
Yeah, I really like the idea of these are information systems, you might say. And I also like just the idea of anything that we're holding that's not of truth and aligned in that channel with the spirit is blocking out the light. And so we're just really, as you said somewhere, like we're not on a witch hunt to find these parts that have done things badly or incorrectly or to shame them or any of that. No, no, no. We're looking to make peace. And for me, mostly I've been just retiring old, tired storylines and parts, retiring them with honor, that they can just take up a different job to serve spirit and to have fun and to be a loving force. And, it's just a much better way to live in my experience. And as I've done that, as you've said, there's just been so much more space in my mind, so much more room for love to flow through. And yeah, there have been a lot of really old, tired, dark, destructive storylines that I've had to work my way through with the spirit. And, when we do this work, seemingly for ourselves, we're doing it for the entire mind. That's the important thing to say at the end of this, is that it always seems like we're talking about a personal journey. But really what we're talking about is reclaiming this light for all, for every single aspect of the mind, to bring it home. So when we do this work, we then can be telegraphing for others. The work that I had to slog through for 25, 30 years, Yuta could come into my energy and bounce that crap right out of her universe easily. It's like the 100th monkey. When we do our healing, then somebody can pick up the toolbox that we've been dragging around because it was pretty heavy, and they can start running with it. My prayer is that anybody that feels like they've been bogged down and dragging their stuff around, if they come into my universe, my prayer is that they can go quantum immediately. They don't have to do that heavy lifting. They'll have their own stuff that they're going to make as a contribution. They're going to have their own things to work out for the one mind that's going to be brilliant and amazing. So we're doing this ultimately for Source, for ourselves, because Source is actually like your home. You're home with me right now. So we're really just breaking down these information systems that keep us from remembering, oh yeah, I am whole and complete right here, right now. So I'm really glad, Yuta, you brought this in today. And yeah, has always been very helpful to me.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a nice place to stop for today. So yeah, thank you for exploring that with me, and it was nice to be joined in the spirit together with this topic. So yeah, thanks to anybody who was listening as well, and yeah, thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.